Okay, hello everyone. This is going to be Citation Part 4. This presentation that I'm going to walk you all through is going to tell you how to use your citations to explain your rules, how to impress your reader, whether that's your law school professors, whether that's a lawyer out in practice, or whether it's a judge. And so we're going to walk through a handful of the most common questions that every novice legal writer has as they're figuring out how to cite and how to use citation. First off, how often do I need to do citation? Do I need to cite after every sentence? Well, like it or not, you're going to cite frequently as an attorney. You want to cite every sentence where you're explaining the rule, because attorneys want to know where your assertions are coming from. They want to be able to check your work. And a cite is all the proof you need that the proposition you've laid out in your writing is true. Whenever possible, tell your reader what the law is in your own words, and then cite those words confidently. Are there exceptions? Yes, of course. A couple that we should think about. First, if you're citing the same page on a case for an entire paragraph, so think here about 4 or so ids strung together in a row. In that narrow circumstance, utilized with care, you can omit all those subsequent ids. Second, if you're using a title sentence to summarize more detailed information that follows, a citation is not strictly necessary. And here's how that looks. So what I've highlighted in blue here is a kind of a title sentence telling me telling the reader what's going to happen in the sentences that follow. Plaintiffs in past cases have shown that they used the disputed land as an owner would in a variety of ways. Now that doesn't need a citation, because you'll notice the next two sentences, the Davis case and the Slack case, give all the authority you need to establish that. And so title sentences are a kind of a rare circumstance where cites aren't needed, even though the stuff in that sentence might seem like it needs some authority. Okay. Let's say you found a bunch of great cases that support your rule. Do you have to cite all of them? No, you do not need to. The purpose of a citation is to prove the legal statement that you just made is true. If the same principle is repeated again and again, that's a great sign that you've got the right rule. It's well settled, and you don't gain anything at all if you repeat that same information. And in fact, you might start to overburden your reader's attention and dilute your good analysis. Think about it this way. If you want a really primo, superior cup of coffee from, let's say, Catalina Coffee Shop over on Washington Avenue, right a couple miles away from school, and let's say I want to order a terrific drip coffee made with the Amaya La Paloma Superior blend, which has notes of stone fruit, raw sugar, nougat. I'm going to enjoy that cup of coffee with gusto. I would not pour that beautiful cup of coffee into a big old pint glass and dilute it with regular tap water. You might think a little bit less of me for being such a coffee nut, and you might be right, but we can agree that sometimes less is more in situations like this. And so if you've got a lot of cases that are citing one rule, just use one of the cases. That's totally fine, and don't dilute your writing. Next thing to think about, if several different cases are stating the same idea, how do I know which case to pick? Which one do I cite? This is going to take a little bit of practice. Your best bet is going to find the highest court. So if it's a Supreme Court or a binding intermediate appellate court, you're also going to want to think about when it was decided. The more recent, the better. But if you have a principle that's frequently repeated, it doesn't really much matter which authority you pick, especially if that decision that you're picking is going to be binding on you in your jurisdiction. This is a good problem to have. What if I have to use a couple of sources to create my legal principle with synthesis? In this case, you'll simply use what we call a string citation. String citations are merely putting together more than one thing with a semicolon to separate the different authorities. So here we've got two cases, United States versus Buffington, and then Slack versus Porter. So if my idea has to come from both of those cases, I just combine them into one super citation, one string citation connected with a semicolon. Parentheticals, how do I use them? So as an attorney, you'll want to sometimes use parentheticals to explain the relationship between a citation and the legal proposition if the connection isn't clear or might benefit from your wise guidance. They can be helpful, but when you use too frequently, parentheticals might bog down your writing. So you want to use these with some care and be judicious with them. Check your reader to help you decide if you might be doing too much of a good thing with your parentheticals. The cite here from the Indigo book, Toulson versus the Yankees, has two parentheticals, one indicating a per curiam opinion. In other words, per curiam is Latin for by the court, and it means an opinion from an appellate court that does not identify any specific judge who might have written the opinion. And the other second explanatory parenthetical here tells us the result in the case. So these are two parentheticals here which have been helpful to understand the case here. Next up, this is a very common thing. I want to cite something from a case, but that case cites an earlier case. Which case do I cite? The one I've got in my hot little hand or the earlier case? Well, your best bet is to cite cases that you read. If you haven't read the case, don't cite it. And you generally are only going to cite to cases that you've got a handle on, that you've got an understanding of, and that's going to mean that you've read them or have at least read the summaries and their head notes. You don't know what a case says unless you've read it, unless you have an understanding of it. And so if you have an inkling that the earlier case might be better, you just got to tighten your belt and go back and give that earlier case a read and see if you're right or not. It's going to take time, but it's time well spent. Next question. Let's say a case I read quotes another case. How do I cite a case when it is quoting earlier case law? This is a super common situation, and the best fix is if you put the quoted material into your own words. Then you can cite the most recent case, and you've likely produced a tighter passage, and it's a better written piece of work. But if you really want to use and quote that case that quotes another case, cite to your most recent case, and then in a parenthetical, include a citation to the earlier case. So you use double quotes around the words from the recent case and single quotes around the quote from the earlier case. And this is what that would look like. So here I'm quoting the Garner case, and I'm letting everybody know that the Garner case is quoting an earlier case, the Cunningham case. And those single quotes, the phrase obstructed for any length of time is being lifted from that earlier 1994 Cunningham case. Next question that will come up probably for you. I've given the reader the name of a case in my sentence. Do I still have to repeat that case name in the citation that follows? No, you can omit that case name, of course. And here's what it might look like. Okay, so we've got a paragraph here. Circumstantial evidence is admissible to establish a defendant's intent to rob a bank. Beautiful cite there to United States versus Loblaw. Second sentence here. Testimony from co-conspirators is one type of circumstantial evidence that can establish a defendant's intent, citing to United States versus Snell. If we want to continue on and discuss Loblaw in some depth, I can say, in Loblaw, Loblaw is italicized, letting us know that's a case, the Ninth Circuit held that the circumstantial evidence was insufficient to establish the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Volume 815 of the Federal Second at Pinpoint Cite, page 1302. So that Loblaw, we don't need to include that right before the 815 in the last citation sentence there because we put it in the actual sentence. Okay, we've been talking a lot about citation. When do I not have to cite? Well, there's two main areas where citation is not necessary in legal writing. First, anytime you are giving the conclusion, your prediction that you are giving for the case you're analyzing. No cite can directly dictate a result in your client's situation because it has not been decided. You are advocating or predicting that result, and a cite can't help you with that. So that's one situation. Don't cite conclusions. Second, if you're conducting analysis by applying rules or bits and bobs of an example case to your client situation in your analysis or your A, in that case, you've already established the rules in the story of your precedent case. And your analysis is for repeating and linking in a helpful way your case back with the rule and authority you've laid out. You don't need to muddle that up with unnecessary citations. So if you've already established the key facts of a precedent case, if you've already established a rule, and then you start likely a new paragraph and you conduct your analysis and link that up with our case, the second batch of citation is not necessary in my own view. And let's finish with this important question. How do I avoid plagiarism? Plagiarism is an unfortunate situation, and it is very easy to avoid by doing what your professor tells you. Writers plagiarize by passing off the writing of someone else as their own. If you are citing properly, though, according to your citation manual, and you're taking on board the guidance of your legal writing professor, you should not be concerned about plagiarizing ideas from another authority. If you're citing for every sentence in your rules and your explanation, you're giving all the credit that you need, and so you're in great shape. Sometimes you need both a cite and a quote if you are borrowing specific words in their unique sequencing. Sometimes it's okay to appropriate, and in that case, yeah, you're going to cite, of course. There are often, though, in the law, phrases that, although you didn't come up with, exist in the law and are repeated over and over and over again. And it's okay to appropriate those key phrases. Every lawyer and judge does it, especially if they're used repeatedly and you see them used repeatedly in briefs and in opinions and elsewhere as you're conducting your research. Deciding when to cite and when it's okay to refrain from using quotation or refrain from using a citation is a judgment call. And it's something that it's an important decision you need to make as a legal writer. You want to take on board the guidance of your supervisor, your legal writing professor, when in doubt. And if you are in serious doubt that you're grabbing too much or taking too much, you have a simple remedy, and that is just to cite. Because it's important to remember that our law school handbook, our student handbook, treats very seriously any plagiarism. And so you want to make sure that you're doing your own work, that you're getting credit for your own work, and that you're also giving credit and supporting others' ideas and other courts' ideas and giving them credit. So that has been a handful of the common questions that you're going to find as you're citing and writing as a legal writer. If you have any other questions at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I'm here to help you write. As always, keep up the good work and happy writing.